if you assent to a mass mind, a groupthink, a story that's being fed to everybody, if you see how easy it is to fall into that, then all you're doing is you're becoming part of a river of people, of a spirit that where everyone believes they have to go in the same direction as everybody else. But when you find somebody who can say no, all of a sudden that's like a rock, a big rock in the middle of that river. And you get enough of those rocks in where the water, has to go around. It doesn't move the rock. You get enough of those rocks in the river. If you get one that's big enough, it starts to change the direction of the river. Now, this is metaphor, right? We're talking about the direction, a current in the mind, a belief that it's a belief in fate. It's like, this is what's going to happen. And is that true? Does anything have to happen? No, it does not. The only way the only way we can fate things to happen is if we get assent, group, collective assent, meaning going along with it. You get enough people who say, no, I'm not going along with that. I don't believe that. And so it's like then it puts a kind of the onus on you, and this is how you can work it against yourself. Well, if I'm not going along with this, what am I going along with? And this is where it really gets real, because you don't have to go along with anything. You can be a pronounced no in the mass mind, and that means you're not going along with anything, not anything. And you say, well, how's that possible? You have to move with life. You have to be, cooperative to some degree. But when things get, when large groups of people get captured in a mass psychosis, which is something that the psychologist Carl Jung said was the most dangerous thing in the world, much more dangerous than nuclear weapons. Mass psychosis is what we are experiencing now. That's what's going on in the world now, because there is no understanding and no skill or facility in simply centering in oneself and saying no. What that does is it brings things to a stillness. It puts you into your center, and you don't have to do a thing. And when you can realize this, when you can make this real. And where is your laboratory, or where is your field of action? It's within yourself. This is the true meaning of being a mystic or an occultist. Some people don't like that word, but it's like occultism is spiritual science. This is approaching your spiritual consciousness with understanding and and knowing how power, force, and energy works in the realm of spirit. It's taking the high ground because it's becoming a cause. So if you can center yourself and dissociate yourself from everything, not to hold in your mind what you think is good and true and beautiful, but to create a space, create like a clearing. It's as though you're in the middle of this river and you become a rock where the river has to go around you. And then you get enough people like that, and pretty soon you can change the direction of the river. Because if there are enough people who are saying no, just simply no, it starts small, but then it builds exponentially, where people start to realize that they have agency in the matter. In other words, they have choice. And when enough people have that feeling of having a choice, they start to wake up. They start to realize, hey, I don't have to go along with this. So in practicality, what we do is we go into meditation, we discover the center of ourselves. It's like a column of light within us, and it has energy, it has power. It's not our power. We can't get intoxicated with it because, well, we can, because that's what ecstasy is. That's what spiritual ecstasy is. But it's not us. We can't take it. We can't take credit for it. All we can take credit for is getting out of the way of it and letting God's energy come through us. But do we understand it? No. Do we know what the right way to go is? Not really. Do we even know enough to judge an event as being good or evil? Not really. Because we simply are not in a position to know the greater scale of any world event, of how it fits into, and tempted to use the word God's plan, but I don't think that God has a plan other than letting us work it out. In other words, we were created as free beings. We were created to discover our agency. We were created to explore and to find our way through the possibilities of our own being. What's possible for us? And that is never a product of the mind. That's something that has to be revealed as we step into it. It's like if you're a painter, or if you're a musician, or you're an author. An author writing a story, he may have an outline, he may have an idea of the characters and the plot, but as he or she starts the actual process of writing the story takes on a life of its own. That's the path of discovery. And that's how we live our lives. But in order for that to be authentic, we have to create a space in mind and spirit, an opening to where that can actually happen without being influenced from anything on the outside. Because if it's influenced by anything on the outside, it simply becomes more of the same. And that's not what life is about. Life is continually in explorative mode. Life wants to find out what it's capable of. And it's never self-destructive. It may destroy forms that no longer serve it. Like, if you're writing a story, you're building a house. And even if you're working with an architect, you may find that something that the architect had in mind and could see and could put down on paper doesn't really work in reality. And so there's an adjustment, there's an adaptation, there's a change in the idea. But in order for that to even show up, you have to hold a space for that possibility. Like, what's the best that can happen? And sometimes we don't see that until we start down the path of what our plan is. And then once that starts to take shape, just like an author writing a story, new things start to emerge. And those new things that emerge, that start to show themselves, save us. They lift us to a higher level of being, and we find a greater possibility that not only did not see, but we could not see until we got to that point in the process. So it's very important for us not to get too set in our ideas of what should be. And this is where trust and faith in God comes in. And God is not, we're not thinking of God as like an external being, or, especially the old man in the sky with a beard and governing from above and moving us around like chess pieces. That's a really an undeveloped conception of God. We are in God, and we are active agents of God. So in other words, God finds God's own creativity in our creativity. As we act in creative ways in our own lives, that's God exploring God's own being through us. Now, this is a whole another level of responsibility, of spiritual responsibility. And it means then that if we really get on board with that and really allow that spirit of creativity to live in us, then we realize, yes, we are spiritual leaders, because we are in harmony with that creative element in God. And as we are in harmony with God, if we are in a great being that we just give the name God to, and that great being is expanding and looking inwardly to it in its own being to try to discover who and what it is, you see, then that is the most powerful position we can put ourselves in, because then we become part of the wholeness of this great being and what it's trying to do. And we are absolutely essential to that process, that it is why we were created. It's why in the Bible it says that we were created in God's image and likeness. It doesn't mean that God has a head and torso and arms and legs. It means that God is creative, like we are creative. We are creative because God is creative. And God can be creative because we are creative. You see, I love that picture of Michelangelo did in the Sistine Chapel, where God is reaching and touching Adam. Their fingers are almost touching. And I think that Michelangelo was a mystic. I really do believe that he was, because so much of mystical reality comes through in his work. And I believe what he was saying is that this God is reaching down, but it's not a one-way interaction. It's a feedback. You see, as God pours his energies into us, we then pour those energies back to God. And God goes, oh, okay, so that's what's happening. All right, let's move this a little bit this way and move that a little bit that way, so that more of that can happen. You see, and that interaction is always going on. It's the same. Here's where the principle as above, so below comes in, because we are the as we create, God creates, and as we express, God is expressing. That we are the fulfillment of that process. So all of this to say that we cannot get in the way of that process by becoming rigid in our thinking. We are in a position right now where we could be on the brink of a disaster like the world has never seen. We have hotspots all over the world, and any one of them could light the match, could light the fire, could set off an explosion. And so that would put us back thousands of years. Billions of people would die, just, if not outright, just simply by the collapse of the infrastructure, because we're so fragile, right now. We are so dependent on each other. And if like we saw the supply chain breakdown during COVID, for instance, and how we got just a little bit of a taste of what it would be like to have a complete disruption of that. So this is not negotiable. This is not something that we can say, oh, this is horrible and too bad for us because that's what's going to happen. That will happen if we allow it to happen. But do we know how to fix it? No, we don't, because there are too many variables in it. So if we try to fix these problems at the level of these problems are created, like Einstein said, that we can't do it. No problem can be solved at the level that it was created. So as spiritual people, we have to rise. We have to rise to a higher level. And that's a level where then seemingly irreconcilable differences can find a creative solution. That is, you have this pole and this pole, and there's this creative tension between them. There's this antagonism that is seemingly that is irreconcilable. It doesn't even seem to be. It is irreconcilable until you rise up above it to a point where they can fit together, that we can find a creative solution to the problem. But as long as we're locked into an ideology or a belief, or we're locked into an emotional reaction to what's going on, the perceived injustice or the outrage of I'm really purposely staying away from precise examples because it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what the specifics are, because we're not dealing on the level that these problems are created. We're looking at all of this from a higher level, the only level that can provide us the creative solutions to these problems. And we don't